So, what's up, guys? And welcome to the coding section and building tools in cybersecurity with Fixitgearware Security. This week, as we promised, is going to round up the project which we commenced that has to do with building pinging tool with Python programming language. And during the course of the training, we demonstrated a few steps. Firstly, by writing a simple code on how we can ping a single IP address. Then subsequently during the training, we tried pinging multiple addresses by specifying these IP addresses in a form of array in Python. And of course, pinging these IP addresses and getting a response. So during the course of the project, we went further to modify the code in a live coding section where we had to fetch a file, which is a text file. And this text file contains a list of IP addresses that we want to ping to see if they are live or not. So after we did that, we tested the tool and we had a success where this tool was able to ping these various IP addresses and got a response. So during the last session of the coding series, we stated that we are going to modify this tool whereby you have to provide a file path or indicate if it's a single IP you want or multiple IP addresses. Then whatever specification you gave, this tool is going to use this specification to now ping the various IP addresses and of course log the results for you. Then we went on further to explain that this project structure is going to be complex, which means we have to code, we have to debug, we have to test. And we wouldn't be doing that on a live section because doing that on a live section would take hours of coding. I mean, being realistic, because you have errors, you have to debug if your codes are properly aligned and so on, right? Which of course is not a good way to train because users might get bored, exhausted. So we said that the complex coding section of our series will be writing those codes. Then after we have tested everything is working fine, we'll now demonstrate everything to you and explain what the tool is all about. So today, that's what we're going to be doing today. And this marks the final session of this coding series with building a ping tool. But in the course of building this project, we had more ideas we want to integrate into this tool. So these ideas, we'll still keep it to be a secret because we are working towards modifying this tool into a higher version for those who are specifically interested in learning how to pen test for IP addresses. Okay, we are working on something, a big project from getting the ideas of building this ping tool. So although this marks the end of the series of the ping tool building series, but it doesn't mark the end of modifying this tool. So this is just the directory where the code is. Of course, we'll be pushing this directory to our GitHub repository. Please clone it, use it as we demonstrated on our video here. And please do not hesitate to give us a star or like, and of course, share with your friends as well. Okay? It's important to encourage people who put in the effort to, put ideas together and put out something productive to help the community. So basically, today, we have modified this tool to the final version, which we call the version 1.0.0. So this version, basically, it's a very sophisticated version whereby you can provide a single IP address. And once the IP is successfully pinged, this IP address will be appended into a text file called reachable_ips.txt. So this file will be created the first time you run this tool. Then subsequently, as you ping more IP addresses, it's not going to erase the file or delete the IP addresses in that file. Rather, it will now be appending to that file, adding more results to the file. So why did we initiate this concept or idea is because we believe once in a while, you might want to visit an IP address you pen tested for a vulnerability, right? And maybe the file you kept it, you cannot find it. So you just need to just cd into this directory, cut the content of reachable_IP_address.txt, then, copy the IP address and test for other, vulnerabilities you want to test using your Nmap to see if there are open ports and services that you can still exploit. from that target. So it's a sophisticated tool. The ideas kept on coming to us, and we started thinking of how we can make it better. And that concept, it's spawned from a place of passion, whereby we want to motivate people to start hacking IP addresses and not just rely on pen testing domains. Okay, because if you are very good with pen testing, you would know that a lot of vulnerabilities exist and can be uncovered using Nmap tool. Okay, and you cannot just feed Nmap IP addresses that contains both dead and alive IP addresses. Okay, that doesn't give a good structure as a penetration tester. So that's the reason why we strategize to build this ping tool in this order. So not just that, also we also created or integrated a concept whereby, let's say the IP addresses that are pinged are not successful, then this tool will be able to create another text file called unreachableips.txt. So this unreachableips.txt is where all IPs that have been pinged that have not been successfully communicated with in terms of receiving back ICMP request, then that shows that that IP is dead or it's not alive, or probably there might be a firewall blocking the request, which we might not tell or we cannot say, but basically it just locks those IP addresses that are not successfully pinged into that file. So subsequently, you can still visit those files to, extract those IP addresses and create a file and still try to reping them again if you intend to keep testing those targets to see if that IP will come back alive. So that is how we modded this tool. There's a lot of things we want to say about this tool, but for the sake of time, we do not have much time and we want to make this video short. So try and use it. Read the readme.md on our GitHub repository. Watch this video on how we're using this tool, and subsequently, if there's any questions you have, tag us on X, ask a question, and of course, we're definitely going to reply to you as long as we see your notification tags that you have tagged us in. So here is the project structure. Here we have the Pingspy version 1.0.0, and here we have the assets. So this asset, basically, it's images of what we want to use to create the instructions. Then here we have the utilities. So utilities, why we created this structure in this way is because we want to define a specific constant, which we stated that is going to be used to create our reachable IPs.txt and unreachable IPs.txt. Then, of course, if you're very familiar with Python, whenever you have a separate directory or you have a root directory, you have to initiate underscore init underscore.py. So what this does is basically telling that this package or this files that has .py extension should be treated as a Python package. So each time you run the code in the main.py, it will initialize every directories or imports that are in the main.py. Okay, that's the essence of this. So moving further to the project, we have the license. Of course, that's the MIT license, which we'll be filling in later on when we put it on our GitHub. Then here we have the loads IP, we have the log result.py, we have the main.py, and we have the pass underscore user input.py, and we have the ping.py. Then for this setup, please just ignore it because we're still working on some concept. So we decided to set this up here because it's very important that we do as we are trying to do some stuff in this tool. So we want to read this later on to check where we have some issues to install this tool via CLI command. Okay, so subsequent version of this tool, you'll be able to install it like, if you know how you install Subfinder and so on, you're going to be able to install these and you just run it as a CLI command. No need for you to get into this root directory, cloning the repository and visiting this root directory again to run the tool. Then here we also have the signal.py. So now let's explain these various .py files and what they do. So this load.ips.py basically is a function that loads the file path that contains this IP address that was provided by the user. So when it loads that file path, it should open it and read its content, okay? And should return it as a single line. So for each IP is treated as a new line, then strip white spaces and empty spaces that exist there. Then of course we created an exception. So if the file was not found, then it will indicate that the file was not found, okay, and return an empty array. Now after this IP has been loaded, we have the pingip.py, okay. Although this is not the order, we'll explain why we are just explaining this. So here it's basically the ping function or the ping file that is responsible for pinging the IP addresses, okay? And of course, we created an exception where it states that there's an error trying to ping that specific IP address, okay? And you can see we created some comments in the code that makes it very easy for you to understand the code. So it's not complex. We made it in such a way that it's very easy for you to read and understand as well. And if there is any confusing, part of the code you don't understand, you just go back to the file and read the comments there. Okay. So not everything that needs you to put a comment. Okay. Just some important part of the code, because once you're able to get the comment here, you should be able to understand what is happening here. Of course, you should know how exceptions are, called in Python. Then over here, we have the pass input. So what is the pass input? So basically, this file and this function is responsible for reading the input the user is giving. Okay, like we stated that this tool has 3 capabilities, actually 4, not 3, but the major function of this tool is 3 capabilities, which is 1, to ping a single IP address, 2, to ping multiple IP addresses, and 3, to ping IP addresses provided via a file path. Okay, so that's the essence of this pass input function, okay, or file. So it reads the user's input and of course detects it to know if it's a file or if it's multiple IP addresses by this, comma here, or if it's just a single IP address. Okay, so that's the essence of this pass input. Try and read this comment. It's very easy to understand, and you'll be able to understand what this function does or what this code does. Now we have the signal handler. So basically, this signal handler, we created it in such a way that, let's say the user tries to interrupt the scan, the ping. It's very important that you create in such a way that this doesn't make your terminal so messy or create some errors that look so, dirty to human eye or, being readable. So we created this function or file that whenever the user hits, like, let's say Ctrl+C, it's just going to print out a statement that process was interrupted, program will now exit. So that's like, beautiful, rather than, throwing some Python paths, exception, crazy code lines. You probably might have seen some tools that are like that, right? So that's the essence of the signal handler.py. So whenever you, put in some keyboard interrupts, this tool will exit and of course tell you that this process was interrupted. Then we stated about setup.py. Please ignore this. Don't install the tool yet. Of course, we are not providing the instruction for this yet. So just ignore this, okay? What else? So we have the log result.py. So this is basically responsible for appending IP addresses. You can see A here, right? So we are not writing or we are not reading, we are appending. So why did we use append into this, in this function here is because we want this file to remain unchanged, rather let it be modified. So when we talk about modification means we want it to keep adding to the file. And when we talk about unchanged, we don't want it to, read if the file exists, to delete it and create a new file, okay? So it's like keeping your records, even though you ping 1 million IP addresses and you later on add additional 200 million addresses. So when you go back to the file, you now have a raw file that contains 201 million IP addresses. So that's the essence of this log results, okay? And not just this log result, the importance of using the A, which is the append in Python, okay? So this is all about the tool. Okay, it's very simple. The codes are not much. Then let's move on to main.py, which is the major function. Okay, so here you can see the various import statements. Here we are importing the signal, then arg parse, so which is argument pass. We are stating the instructions, okay, which will be printed in the terminal when you use the help command line. Okay, then we have to import the pass input, which is the instruction from the user if it's a single IP address, if it's a multiple IP address, or if it's a text file. Then we have the import statement for ping IP. So we want to import the ping IP file to ping these IP addresses after reading the user's pass input. Okay. Then of course, after everything is done, you should log the result. And if during the process of the pinging and this process was interrupted, then let signal handler handle this. So this is the main function command. It's very straightforward. The only place that looks complicated is just here, which is not that too complicated. You can just read from code line 8 to code line 32. Okay, or let's say 34. Then the other ones are like basically, if you're familiar with what we did the last time, still the same. IP list and IP input and so on, and printing the statement. Okay, then after everything has been done, let it print out that okay, the files has been logged, and tell us where we have to read our results. Okay, so for reachable IPs, you just use cat command on your terminal and provide this file name, and it's going to display the results. And for unreachable IP addresses, you also use this, and of course it's going to display unreachable IP addresses. Then of course, if name equals to this main, then run the CLI command. So basically, this is just all about the tool. Not so complex, not so like too bogus of a code, but it's quite difficult, like debugging and so on. We had to like infuse a lot of methods to finally achieve this. So in our subsequent version of this tool, because we are very fired up to make it a more version or a more higher version with more integration into this tool, that's going to help you to automate IP pen testing. So expect more features added into Pingspy, and probably we might probably rename it to another name depending on the function of what the tool will be able to do in the future. Okay, so having said this, let's demonstrate this tool with our Linux box machine. So here is our Linux terminal. I can just say cd to my desktop. That's where I put the tool. Then I can say into Pingspy hyphen version 1.0.0. Then I clear this. Then I say ls. So this is the main function. Okay, and one more important information is that this tool was written with Python 3. So you run this with Python 3. Okay, so I can say Python 3. Okay, sorry, main.py hyphen help. So once you use this, it's going to list all the help command on how to use this tool. Okay, and you can see in this directory right now, we don't have the reachable text and the unreachable text file, right? So let's now run for a single IP address. So let's say Python 3 main.py --IP, then we'll say 64.233.189.147. So here we are just specifying a single IP address, right? And we hit enter. Then it tells us detected a single IP, pinging this, and response this. Now, if we ls right now, because the IP was reachable, it has created reachable IPs.txt, right? So if we cut this right now, okay, and we paste this, and you can see our result is here, properly refined. Now, let's say we want to ping multiple IP addresses. Hold on. So I already saved this in a Notepad++ file so that I don't waste much time. So we wait. It's going to take a while. But it's okay. If it doesn't work, let's just run this. So I can say Python 3. Okay. Then I can say main.py. Oh, it's here. Okay, good. So here is multiple IP addresses. Okay, I can just copy this. And I come to my terminal and I paste this. Okay. Now it said detected multiple IPs, right? And now it's pinging the ones that are reachable. It's telling us this is reachable. This is reachable. This is not reachable. This is reachable. This is not reachable. And tells us that, okay, now it has given us a new information that result has been logged into cat reachable IP.txt and unsuccessful result has been cut, saved into this. So you can cut this file to check them. So if we ls right now, you should see something, right? You can see this unreachable IP and reachable IP. So I can just come here and just copy this and paste. Okay, then I hit enter. So we have 3 unreachable IP addresses, and if we go to our initial command we ran, you can see we have 3 unreachable IP addresses, right? Good. Now let's now cut this one. You will see what's gonna happen. You will see that the previous IP we pinged, which is this number, is still there and it's still added into that same file. Again, without overriding or resetting the file. You can see 147, 147, 148, 149. And here we have how many reachable IP addresses? We have 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So the more you keep pinging IP addresses, the more it keeps adding to that list. So there's no need for you to be worried about, or what if I want to go back to that same result and check these IP addresses to see if I can use my Nmap tool to scan for other vulnerabilities via banner grabbing, right? So that shouldn't be a problem because now you know that this is going to work, okay? Because you just go back to that file, take these IP addresses, and of course, fire up your Nmap tool. Now, the final part of this tool is, let's say we want to ping from a text file, right? So here we have Python 3, okay? Then we say main.py _file. So the flag here is file, okay? You have to specify file. So once it sees this flag, it knows that you're reading from a file. Okay, so we already have an IP address, which is this one. So let me just copy this so I don't forget the name. Okay, then I can say the part. So I can say in home, downloads, then name the name of the file, .txt. Always put the name of the file, .txt, okay? Then hit enter. Now it's telling us that it has detected the file input and told us where the directory path is, where the file path is, okay? So to ensure that we are reading from the actual file we want to ping. And now subsequently it's pinging these IP addresses and it's telling us the results, the ones that are successful, the ones that are unsuccessful, the ones that are successful, and so on. And once it's done, it's going to append this same, successful IP addresses to the reachable _ips.txt. And for the unsuccessful ones, it is also going to append them into the unsuccessful IPs or unreachable IPs.txt. Okay. And you can see the pinging is so fast. Okay. So these IP addresses are like proxy lists we got online. Okay. These are not real like targets we got from bug bounty or recon. So this tool specifically is going to help you, especially if you're into testing IP addresses. Okay. You just ping and extract the ones that are successful, which of course are receiving, your tool is able to get the reply. And from there, you can now fire up Nmap tool to, see if you can scan some open ports and services, and of course, try some vulnerabilities, attack via POCs or using your own payloads that you have created, to test for various vulnerabilities. So you can see it's scanning. You can see the IP addresses are much. Good. Now it's done. Now, if we clear this and we ls and let's say we cut reachable IP addresses, you're going to see our list is becoming much larger, right? You can see here, right? Good. Now, if we also cut unreachable, you can see, right? So as we keep testing and keep, pinging multiple IP addresses, it's going to keep appending to this various list to ensure that these records are stored. So once in a while, you can still visit those IP addresses again and ping them to see the ones that are still alive. And of course, extract them to like, okay, go test for, open ports and services via Nmap or any other tool that you use to test IP addresses. So that is all for this tool and rounding up this project. Please visit our GitHub repository to clone this project and give us a like or a star. If you're not following, please follow us. It's quite sad that, people will just use your stuff and they won't, encourage you by giving you a star. It doesn't hurt anyway for you to do that, but it's okay. Just do it at your own free will, because it's also something that we want you to be, part of our family from your heart. Okay. Genuinely following us, supporting us. Okay. Not because you felt out of sympathy. No. Follow us because you felt whatever we're saying or whatever we're teaching is very educative for you and it can help you to grow in cybersecurity. So that is all. Thank you for watching and have an amazing weekend and spend time with your family. Bye for now.